As we think about the engagement with KualiCo, I'm going to introduce Joel in just a moment, but I think it's also a useful moment to give just a little insight about that journey over the summer. Many of you participated in the Kuali community strategy sessions. We've had over 100 in Minneapolis and in Salt Lake City, and to reach the conclusions to head in this direction. As we go forward, one of the things that we really thought a lot about, and I want to encourage everybody to pause and listen and think about it. Higher ed, sometimes we've moved into almost a simplistic view of the world, of open source and various open source projects across higher ed, that we're good and on the side of the angels. And somehow there's those commercial folks over there, and they're the ones who are always jacking our revenue or trying to tell us we've got license expansion costs, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. And it's a very simplistic understanding. This community was never founded with that view. If you read the original press release that announced the creation of Kuali, a commercial firm was listed in that press release. We've grown the commercial affiliates along the way, and they have been members of the foundation and still are, just as universities are members of the foundation. We innovated then for the ecosystem in a way that we thought would work well for that decade, premises-based software, and just proving we could build the darn thing when in the midst of great skepticism. So we're innovating again. And as we bring in .com, as we bring in KualiCo as part of that and continuing our relationships with commercial affiliates, are going to do a range of things that this community needs in implementation, in migration, and all sorts of support services around it. I encourage you to listen with your ears wide open of what KualiCo can do, organized not as a Wall Street traded firm that has imperatives that are often different than the imperatives of this community, but as a creature of this community to help with our goals and to help us accelerate into our second decade. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Joel Dehlin, the CEO of KualiCo. Joel has a very storied background in software. He worked at Microsoft for over 10 years. He says he is not responsible for a number of things that you may associate with various Microsoft errors, but in working at Microsoft Research, carries a number of patents, including patents around Surface, if you've ever worked on a Surface table, some big, large, very complicated multi-user games, and you know gamers are really all into that user experience and care about that greatly. Joel has carried the responsibility of being a chief information officer, running an organization of over 1,000 IT employees with a worldwide service footprint. And I first met him when he was the chief technology officer at a company called Instructure. They have the Canvas learning management system, and completely apart from all things Kuali, I was eventually won over as we were putting together something called Unison, that here, the open source guy, the co-founder of Sakai, we took Unison into Canvas with Instructure, and it was largely because we were seeing the outcomes that Joel was creating as the chief technology officer there. About the time between our two community strategy sessions this summer, Joel decided that he was going to do something different, and serendipity took hold, and with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Joel Dehlin, CEO of KualiCo.
Thank you very much, Brad. Can you see the slide? It helps to have my glasses. What a great celebration. It's amazing to be with you and to see the celebration that's happening and to commemorate the last 10 years of what's been going on in the Kuali community. It's absolutely energizing to me to see. When I was out with Brad a year ago talking about Unison and Instructure, it was at the Kuali Days meeting that we happened to meet to have that discussion. And so it was fun to kind of see you working from the periphery. And now it's amazing to be involved. My name is Joel Dehlin. I'm the CEO of KualiCo. We have a great group of employees, and we're excited to be working with you. I will admit that over the last 3 months, I've spent a lot of time trying to get up to speed, which includes hiring a lot of people, buying a portion of the RSmart business, the hosting and cloud portion of the RSmart business, so that we're ready to host KFS and Koya's and ready today, and just getting used to the lingo, the acronyms. That, I mean, if somebody had a database, maybe that's the first software we should do, is an acronym finder for the database. Hopefully after Kuali Days now, we'll be able to spend a little bit of time relaxing and chilling out a little bit. It's been fun. I have to confess that communication, we have not communicated as effectively from KualiCo yet as we could, and so I understand that sometimes on 10th anniversaries, it's a tradition to make something out of tin or give something out of tin or aluminum. So we have a gift for you. It'll be outside when you're done. Our engineers have put together a new communication device that we'll be using in KualiCo so that we can better communicate with each other. I want to tell you, to put 10 years in context, I want to tell you 3 stories. The first story is about a man named John. John Roebling was a German immigrant living in New York City. And he was asked to do something in 1870 that no one had ever done before. He was asked to put together the longest suspension bridge in the world. And this was to go between the Manhattan borough, the New York borough, and the Brooklyn borough. He didn't know how to do it. He'd never done it before, but he set about to start. Well, in the middle of doing it, his foot was crushed between a ferry and a piling. His toes were amputated, and he ended up dying. Shortly after, he turned over the building of the Brooklyn Bridge to his son, Washington. So Washington took it over. Now, Washington spent a lot of time with the workers, and he'd go down to these giant tubes. You've probably seen these tubes before. And you put these tubes down into the water. It allows you to create a space of air between the bridge and the bottom of the bay or the ocean where you're building the bridge so that the workers can get down to the bottom and make sure that the pilings are safe and that they're built and they've dug out whatever they need to dig out. Well, they put compressed air into these tubes to prevent the tubes from crushing and also so that the workers can breathe. Unfortunately, when you have compressed air, sometimes people come out with decompression disease or the bends. Washington caught the bends. Caught, as if it's a virus. Washington had the bends, and it basically left him incapacitated. So for the rest of the project, he had to stay in his room, and his wife, Emily, finished up the project. So Emily learned about advanced math in order to work with the engineers and the workers in order to finish the Brooklyn Bridge. And it's an incredible monument today. It took just over 10 years. This is a picture of my daughter. My daughter and I visited New York City last week, a few months ago. It was a wonderful experience, and we went to the Brooklyn Bridge. And this is a little pizza place that was right across from the bridge that we went to. We had a great time. How we did not end up with a picture of us on the Brooklyn Bridge, I do not know. But we had a great time. So this is Peg Mitchell. Peg Mitchell entered the social scene in Atlanta in 1922. Peg was dating 2 men, Red and John. They were roommates, and Peg had to choose between the 2, and Peg chose Red. So she married Red, and John was the best man at the wedding. So reportedly, Red was abusive, emotionally and physically, to Peg, and couldn't afford the family. He was a bootlegger, and they didn't have enough money in order to survive, so Peg went to work at the Atlanta Journal. She became a writer. She wrote over 150 articles. One of the articles she wrote was an interview she did of Rudolph Valentino, the famous Italian actor. So she interviewed him on this very romantic, the top of the building, out with the sky all around them. And at the end of the interview, Rudy picked her up, swept her off her feet literally, and carried her back down into the office. She said it was one of the highlights of her life. She was dissatisfied with her marriage, but she was happy with her job. She wanted to get a divorce, and Red would not grant her one. So enter John, the original roommate. John came back in and offered a loan to Red, who was in financial trouble. And so Red said, okay, I'll grant her a divorce if you'll give me this loan. And then John married her. So Peg, in her own words, became a housewife. She quit work and she went home to work, to be in the home. But she never could get rid of the desire to write. So she started writing again secretly. She started writing a novel. She'd write the pages, and she'd take the pages, and she'd put them into a manila folder, and she'd hide them in her sewing machine. And then she'd write more pages when she ran out of space, and she'd put them in Piggly Wiggly bags. Any of you familiar with Piggly Wiggly? Those in the South in particular. She'd put them in the Piggly Wiggly bags, and she'd put them under the bed. And then she'd even take loose pieces of paper that she'd written, and she'd throw them in the window seat. She had over 70 chapters that she'd written over a period of years. So her friends from the Atlanta Journal, pardon me, this is her husband, John. Her friends from the Atlanta Journal invited her to lunch one day. So she went to lunch, and they had a publisher there. So the publisher was interested in seeing her book, but she wouldn't let him see it. So her friends tried to goad her into it. Her friends said, oh, come on, you can do it. You probably don't even have a book. You don't want to even be published. What's your deal? And so that goaded her into going home. She got a box, and she put all of the different pages, the manila folders, the Piggly Wiggly bags, all the papers from the window seat into a box, and she ran to the train station to give this box to the publisher before he got on the train. So he got on the train, he read the book. When he got to his office, he sent her a telegram. And the telegram said, we'd like to forward you, prepay $500 for this book that you've written. Now here's Peg, who didn't even know how good the book was. She'd never written a book before. And she trusted this guy she didn't know, this stranger, to look at this book. And she ended up getting a $500 down payment on this book and a great royalty if the book ever became successful. The book was Gone with the Wind. It was the only book that Peg ever wrote. But it was amazingly successful. It took her just over 10 years. Are you getting the pattern? There's one more story. I want to tell you about James Cameron. Any of you know who James Cameron is? Yeah, of course. So James Cameron was working on Titanic. So in 1994, he was finishing up Titanic, terribly over budget, terribly over time. It took him a few more years to get it out. But he started thinking about his next movie, a movie he'd wanted to make since he was young. So he wrote an 80-page document describing what this movie would be like. It had creatures in it that could not be played by humans and could not be played by Muppets or puppets. This was 1994, and he wanted almost the entire movie to be made up of creatures that you could not do on a screen. So as soon as he finished Titanic, he started working on the movie. He started hiring and firing actors, hiring and firing different people. He started refining the script and working with the technology and found that the technology couldn't do what he wanted to do. It took James Cameron almost 10 years to finish Avatar. But when he finished Avatar, and the reason was because the technology, he had to wait for the technology to catch up. When he finished Avatar, Avatar became the first movie in history to gross $2 billion in box office receipts. Now that was a bet. It was a huge bet. And it's something that ended up being successful for him. So just like Cameron and Mitchell and others who have done large projects like this, Kuali has its own 10-year story. You have your own successes, and you've had your own challenges. And as we celebrate the last 10 years, we can acknowledge that there are challenges ahead. There'll be things that we're going to have to cover together, that we're going to have to work together. The Kuali Foundation did a survey last week. It was an informal survey, and there were about almost 150 people who responded to the survey. One of the things we found, the question was asked, are you satisfied with the pace of development? About 22% said that they were satisfied. That's a huge place for improvement. That's just unacceptable. We've got to be able to figure out how to improve the pace of development. So here are some ways that we can do that. This is an actual snake in Indonesia, and that snake swallowed a dog whole. This is not a joke. It's an actual snake that swallowed a dog whole. Right? Doesn't that just tug at your heartstrings? When we do large projects, when we spend 6 months or a year or 18 months on a project, that's what happens. We swallow this big dog and we get to the end of the 18 months and we think, oops, we didn't exactly get that right, but we've already spent 18 months doing it. It is really, really hard to do small slices of functionality. But when you do, it pays off so big, because if you make a mistake, you only wasted a week or a month or maybe a couple of months instead of 18 months. So one way that we can make sure that we improve our velocity is to take much smaller bites of the apple. So that's what we're encouraging the project teams to do, to get out of the business of doing big, long projects, but to take little, tiny, small bites of the apple. If we do that, we'll iterate to a much more productive environment. Does that look familiar? One of the great beauties of the Kuali community is the ability for everyone to have input. And one of the great drags on developer productivity is the ability for everybody to have input. We've got to figure out a way so that the committees are very involved. One of the reasons the reason I'm here, honestly, is I was so excited to work with the committee. I had another plan. I was doing other things. And Brad convinced me that the Kuali community is a bunch of passionate, and I found this to be true, a bunch of passionate, smart, thoughtful people who are innovators who want to make change. So we've got to figure out a way to harness that and give people the opportunity to continue to make changes, but we've got to get committees out of the weeds. So that's what we'll be working with the projects to do, is get committees out of the weeds so that we can hire professionals who are amazing interaction designers and business analysts and developers and QA people, and they can run. And the committees will be focused on helping with high-level prioritization. We also need to focus on simplicity. Simple user experiences, simple architectures. You've heard a lot about Rice, and Rice has served its time and has done some great things, but Rice needs to change. Rice needs to be decoupled. It needs to be simpler. You need to be able to upgrade just one component of Rice without upgrading the whole thing. And we're working with Sarah and the Rice team in order to be able to do that to support these projects. Simplicity will make things much better for us. And then we need to have different tools. More tools. There are many tools that are modern tools that really improve user experience and productivity that are not being used in the community today. So we're looking forward to bringing those tools in to help us to improve our ability to deliver. Another part of the survey was a question about user experience. Are you satisfied with your overall user experience? About 21% were satisfied with the overall user experience. Now, I'm going to show you some other data that's interesting. 21% were satisfied with the overall user experience. Almost all are satisfied with the applications. They're just not satisfied with elements of the user experience. And those are things that are not that hard to improve, that we have the ability to improve. So let me give you a couple things we're going to do. The first is we're bringing in professional interaction designers. So empowered professional interaction designers whose job it is to make the software beautiful. It'll take us a while. We're going to iterate in small chunks, but we'll have interaction designers that are helping us to do that. Now, these are the kinds of people that work at big software companies like a Facebook or a Pinterest or a whatever, and not so much at typical enterprise software companies. In addition, we need to focus on that interaction design. So we're going to have some tough prioritization decisions where we go in and talk about prioritizing something, and sometimes people are going to say, I don't want to focus on that dumb look and feel thing. Who cares about the look and feel? We've got to care about it, and we have to prioritize it because it's what makes our software a joy to use. We need leadership. We've got some really, really great people in the community, but sometimes they're hampered. Sometimes they're not fully empowered in order to make decisions. We don't really have the notion of product managers who are responsible for every aspect of that product, who are accountable to the customers to make sure that we deliver software in a way that solves the business problems. We have to have those kinds of empowered architectural leaders and empowered product managers to make great software. We also need a mechanism that supports itself going forward. We need a mechanism that pays its own bills. Today, it's the few who pay the bills. Now, you would say, yeah, it's whoever brings the gold makes the rules. And I've heard that many, many times. And that's true and has served us well. The problem is, if it's the few, you got to keep paying the gold forever. You've always got that burden. Whereas if we have a company that signs up lots and lots of customers, then we spread out that burden among all the customers instead of just 20 or 30. So that's why one of the reasons it was important to create a commercial entity that could help drive adoption with marketing and sales and RFPs and those types of things. That was a real machine, by the way. That magnetic thing was an actual. So Kuali 2.0. The reason why we're working together, I want to be clear. There's a difference between KualiCo and Kuali 2.0. Kuali 2.0 has one element in it, which is a company. But the community is still the most important part of what we're doing with Kuali 2.0. Change is hard. So as we move to this change, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw stuff up. People are going to write bad things about us in the press. There are going to be hard things that happen because change is hard. And, we're kind of familiar with change because we're familiar with bad sequels. I mean, all of you have gone to movies before where the sequel just wasn't quite as good as the original movie, right? Have you experienced that before? My kids, when I watched Star Wars with my kids, it was like devastating to me to see what they did with the franchise when we saw the first couple. That is not this. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to make Kuali 2.0 incredible. But change is hard, I get it. I'm going through some changes myself in my personal life. So I have 7 kids, and sorry. I have 7 kids, and I have a very special relationship with my daughter, Hannah. We spend a lot of time together, and we do YouTube videos. So we'll sing together and play guitar and have fun. And she's gone off to college. She's my oldest daughter. It just breaks my heart. I'm excited for her. I love her. She's meeting boys. But it's hard. She recorded this video that she sent to me. I'm not going to play it for you, and it was like, I thought, oh my gosh, this is my daughter, it's my baby, and it's our thing. We do the videos. You don't do that on your own, we do it together. And yet I'm so excited that she's doing it on her own. It's really pleasing to me. I had a conversation with MPG last week from Maryland, and he said the same thing. He said, look, I feel like, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I feel like we've given birth to this student project. And it's pretty amazing, and I feel like we're kind of handing it over to a new group. It's like our child that's barely walking, and now we're handing it over, and we're trusting. And that's true. And I think we together have a responsibility to make sure that it's awesome. You get this, right? You deal with change every day. In your own personal lives and in your own business, in the schools, you deal with this kind of change all the time. In fact, I want to give you some examples, just to give you some perspective, some pretty big changes that have happened primarily during the last 10 years when Kuali's been around, okay? Just to kind of put the idea of change in your mind. What is that? Does anyone know? IBM. He said IBM. Ouch, I didn't say it. Well, you might say it's a brontosaurus, but you'd be wrong, because when we were kids, it was a brontosaurus, but then we found out that, oops, that was another dinosaur head that we put on that animal, and it wasn't actually a brontosaurus. It was a dinosaur that already existed, but the head was wrong, and so, oops, there's no more brontosaurus. So they're taking brontosauruses out of the record books. That hurts. I still have my little plastic brontosaurus dinosaur. What about mobile devices? Mobile devices that now have more power than entire buildings full of computers not long ago. If you look at like 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, what were the mobile devices like? They were like, this big, and it was this. 10 years so much has happened in mobile devices in the last 10 years. They weren't that big, but. Selfies. Selfies is just the last few years where selfies have become a thing. But it seems like it's been forever, right? It's just a few years since we've been doing selfies. And if you've never done a bear selfie, you should not do that. Because bears can run, 50 miles an hour? And what about our old friend? Can we have a moment of silence? One of our planets is no longer a planet, and that's really primarily happened in the last 10 years. And then, of course, binge watching. So I want to ask, how many of you, I see smiles, how many of you have ever binge watched an entire series, whether it be House of Cards or Orange is the New Black or 24? I see it, right? That didn't happen 10 years ago, but now Netflix comes out with the entire series tomorrow, and in fact, that's what I'm doing next week, is with the chicken with the head cut off in the jacuzzi, we're gonna binge watch whatever series we've missed over the last few months. Twinkie died. You guys are laughing. This is a part of my youth that just disappeared and died. It was sad, and it was because of a stupid labor dispute. It was horrible. But luckily, it was resurrected. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. So luckily, Twinkie is back. And, it's new and improved and will survive 2 nuclear strikes instead of just 1. And then, of course, the Beebs. The Beebs is a recent phenomenon. And Beebs has gone from Beebs, nice boy Beebs, to bad boy Beebs. That whole thing happened just in the last few years. So much has happened in the last 10 years. And the reason I give you those examples is to say that 10 years is a long time. We've accomplished so much in the last 10 years, and we can accomplish so much more. But I want to tell you something that's gives me so much hope and excitement. With all the struggles and with all the challenges in the current Kuali community, when you ask people if they're happy that they made the decision, almost 70% say that they're happy they made the Kuali decision. That's with software that can be slower than it should be sometimes, and user experience sometimes isn't what it needs to be. People are still delighted. They're happy because it's software being made for education, by education. It works better than it does from taking old corporate software and retrofitting it in education. And that alone makes me believe that we can do amazing things together. We don't need 10 years to do it. It doesn't need to take us 10 years to do big things. So I want to make a challenge. And the challenge is to KualiCo, but it's also to you. And the challenge is, what can we do in 1 year? What can we do in 2 years? Let's work together to accelerate our development, to create amazing user experiences, and to do big things in Kuali in the next year. Thanks.